You know, people talk a lot about motivation. I'm just waiting to feel motivated. They say, like motivation is some magical lightning bolt that's supposed to strike before we do anything meaningful. But let's be honest, it's unreliable. One day it's there, the next it's not. And if we let our actions depend on whether we feel like doing something, we'll spend a lot of our lives waiting. The truth is, motivation is a state. It comes and goes. It's like weather, sometimes sunny, sometimes cloudy, sometimes just plain miserable. And if you only show up on the sunny days, you're going to miss half your life. That's why the real secret isn't motivation. It's discipline. Discipline is showing up when you don't feel like it. Discipline is doing the work even when the emotional payoff isn't immediate. It's the decision to stick with something not because it's fun or exciting in the moment, but because you've committed to it. Because it matters to you on a deeper level. Here's something fascinating that happens when you prioritize discipline. Your brain starts to change. You begin to rewire the neural circuits associated with follow-through and effort. You create a feedback loop where effort becomes less about pushing and more about doing. You begin to associate showing up with identity. I'm the kind of person who doesn't back down. I'm the kind of person who keeps promises to myself. And once that identity begins to form, things shift. There's a neural cost to breaking the streak. Your system becomes attuned to the routine, and showing up feels less like a negotiation and more like a natural part of who you are. That's what discipline does. It removes the constant decision-making process of whether you'll act. You just do. I think too many people assume that top performers feel like doing the hard stuff every day. They don't. They just make it non-negotiable. It's not about some superhuman grit. It's about structure, consistency, and the ability to work in friction. They have days where they're exhausted, where they don't want to be there, where everything in their body says, skip it today. But they show up anyway. Why? Because they've trained themselves to value action over emotion. They've built discipline into their identity. And that's the shift we all need to make. If you're waiting for the perfect feeling, you'll never get anywhere. Discipline bypasses all of that. Discipline is a choice that cuts through excuses. It says, I'm not going to let how I feel dictate who I am. Now, let's ground this in something practical. One of the best things you can do is build friction out of the habits you want and friction into the habits you don't. Lay your gym clothes out the night before. Set an alarm across the room. Schedule your work block at the same time each day. Remove the guesswork. The fewer decisions you need to make, the more energy you can spend actually showing up. Because here's the thing, the more you show up, the less mental resistance you face over time. Discipline has a compounding effect. Every day you act in alignment with your goals. You reinforce those neural pathways. You become more fluent in the language of effort. And over time, showing up doesn't just become easier. It becomes essential, it becomes who you are, and no, this doesn't mean you have to be perfect. You're human. There will be days when you fall short, when you miss a step, when life gets in the way. But the point of discipline isn't perfection, it's resilience. It's the ability to recommit, to realign, to keep going even after a setback. Discipline isn't about never falling off, it's about never staying down. So if there's one thing I want you to remember, it's this: stop waiting. Stop hoping for some surge of inspiration to carry you forward. Force yourself to show up again and again and again, because showing up daily is what builds strength, not just physical strength, not just mental strength, but the kind of strength that shapes the trajectory of your entire life. That's the power of discipline, and it's always within your control. We all want to make progress. That's something almost everyone agrees on. Whether it's in your career, your health, your relationships, or your mindset, progress is what we're aiming for. But here's the hard truth. Progress doesn't happen in some big cinematic moment. It's not this dramatic leap forward you see in a highlight reel. Real progress is subtle, it's slow. It's built one moment, one action, one decision at a time. and none of that can happen if you're not there. You have to show up. I mean really show up. Not just physically, but mentally, emotionally, intentionally. Because it's in the daily showing up, in the reps, in the conversations, in the small efforts, that growth actually takes root. You can't become more skilled, more focused, more grounded, if you're only showing up when it's convenient or when the stars align perfectly. The brain learns through repetition. Neuroplasticity, this incredible capacity for your brain to rewire itself, is activated by consistency. You can't train your nervous system to adapt if you're missing half the practice. You can't become great at anything if you're constantly skipping the moments that matter just because they don't feel exciting. And the moments that matter, they're usually quiet, they're unremarkable, they're boring even, but they're critical. The process of growth is about stability. When you show up every day, even in small ways, you're sending a clear signal to your brain. This is important. This is who I am. This is what I'm about. That's how progress happens, not with one huge push, but with repeated reminders to your own biology that this direction, this behavior, this effort is worth reinforcing. And let's be honest, there are going to be days when showing up feels pointless. When you think, what's the difference? It's just one day. But the truth is, skipping one day has more weight than you think. Because it's not just a missed workout, or a skipped journal entry, or a delayed task. It's a tiny fracture in the structure you're trying to build. It chips away at the rhythm, and the brain thrives on rhythm. It finds safety and clarity in patterns. When you break the pattern, even slightly, you invite chaos back in. That's why the goal isn't perfection. The goal is presence. You don't have to do it all perfectly. You just have to be there. Some days you'll be running at full speed. Other days you'll barely be able to crawl. But either way, if you're there, you're in the game. You're giving your brain a chance to learn, your body a chance to adapt, and your character a chance to strengthen. I've studied how people adapt, how they build habits, how they handle stress, how they transform over time, and one thing is always clear: consistency is a signal. It tells the brain what to invest in. When you show up every day, even in small ways, you're telling your system, put energy here, this matters. And the more you reinforce that, the deeper those pathways get carved into your brain. But here's where most people get tripped up. They wait for results before they commit. They want evidence first. If I see a change, then I'll keep going. That's backward. The system doesn't reward you before the work. It rewards you because of the work. You don't get progress and then show up, and then you earn progress. That's the order always. So, what does this look like in real life? It's waking up and doing your routine even when it feels pointless. It's writing the page that might never be published. It's going to the gym when you feel weak. It's having the hard conversation when you'd rather stay quiet. It's all those tiny acts of presence that seem invisible in the moment but stack up over time. And when you do that long enough, something really powerful happens. You begin to trust yourself. Not because everything feels good or looks successful right away, but because you've proven that you'll be there. That trust becomes a foundation. It gives you confidence, not in the outcome, but in your ability to stay in the process. And that kind of confidence, that's unshakable. So don't underestimate the power of presence. Don't look for shortcuts or dramatic wins. Look for the quiet hours, the daily grind, the overlooked moments. That's where progress hides. That's where everything meaningful begins. Because at the end of the day, progress requires presence. Force yourself to show up every day. Confidence is one of those things that everyone wants, but most people misunderstand. We tend to think of confidence as something you're either born with or something you magically feel after you succeed. But that's not how it works. Real confidence, the kind that lasts, the kind that carries you through tough days, isn't something you wait for. It's something you earn. And the way you earn it is by showing up consistently, especially when it's hard. There's something powerful that happens in the brain when you repeatedly do the things you say you're going to do. When you push past resistance and follow through, you start sending a signal to yourself, I can be trusted. That internal trust, that self-reliability, is what builds true confidence. Not hype, not validation from others, but the quiet realization that you are dependable even when no one's watching, even when it's inconvenient, even when it would be easier not to. Every time you show up, you're laying down a neural marker. You're reinforcing circuits of discipline, courage, and resilience. And over time, those repetitions form a kind of inner stability. The brain begins to associate effort and consistency with identity. This is who I am. I don't flake. I don't hide. I keep going. That's not just motivation anymore. That's structure. That's neurobiological alignment with your goals. What's interesting is how confidence often comes after the hard part, not before. We think, if I felt more confident, I'd start, but in reality, it works the other way around. You start, you struggle, you stick with it, and then confidence shows up. You don't feel ready. You feel clumsy, unsure, maybe even like a fraud, but you move anyway, and then you move again. And every time you do, you chip away at doubt and reinforce belief. And here's something a lot of people miss. You don't need to be perfect to earn confidence. You just need to be consistent. Confidence doesn't come from flawless execution. It comes from repeated engagement. You build it by showing up when you're tired, by continuing when you're frustrated, by choosing action over avoidance. It's in the accumulation of effort, not the illusion of mastery, that confidence finds its roots. Now, neurologically speaking, when you show up and accomplish something, even something small, your brain releases dopamine. Not only does that feel good, but it also strengthens the neural pathways that say, this was worth it. And the more you hit those reps, the more the system wants to keep going. So showing up isn't just good for discipline, it's chemically reinforcing. It literally makes it more likely that you'll show up again tomorrow. And this isn't just about big goals, it's about the little things too. Confidence is built in the way you carry out small tasks. Did you say you were going to wake up early? Did you follow through? Did you say you'd drink more water, go for a walk, read 10 pages? These may seem like minor things, but they compound. They send a message, I follow through. That's the kind of self-evidence confidence feeds on. But the opposite is also true. Every time you break a promise to yourself, every time you choose comfort over commitment, you reinforce the opposite message, I can't be counted on. That might sound harsh, but it's real. The brain is always watching, always keeping score. So the more often you show up, the stronger that sense of personal credibility becomes. You're teaching yourself that you're the type of person who does what needs to be done, even when you don't feel like it. And over time, that sense of trust in yourself, it becomes armor. It doesn't mean you never feel doubt again. It just means doubt doesn't control you. You can walk into the unknown, face challenges, handle setbacks, because deep down, you know you'll show up again tomorrow. That's what confidence really is, not arrogance, not ego, but deep-rooted self-trust built through consistent action. So don't wait to feel ready. Don't wait to feel confident. That feeling will come, but only if you build the evidence for it. Show up every day, not perfectly, not dramatically, just consistently. That's how confidence is built. One choice, one rep, one day at a time. Force yourself to show up every day. Most people think breakthroughs are sudden. That success shows up like lightning, loud, dramatic, unforgettable. But in reality, it's almost never like that. What really changes a person's life, their skills, their mindset, their direction, it all comes from repetition. Quiet, consistent, often unglamorous repetition. Success hides in the reps. Think about how the brain works. The nervous system learns through experience. through signals that are repeated again and again until they become automatic. Every time you do something, whether it's practicing a skill, handling stress, showing up for a task, your brain is recording it. It's adapting, it's adjusting, and when you do it enough times, the circuit becomes more efficient. Faster, stronger, more reliable, but you don't get to that point with one big effort. You get there by stacking reps. And this is where most people struggle. They want the results without the repetition. They want to skip the grind and jump straight to the reward. But that's not how the system works. You don't get good at something by thinking about it. You get good at it by doing it again and again, especially when it's hard, especially when it's boring, especially when no one's watching. That's the truth, and that's what makes showing up daily so important. Each time you show up, even when you're not seeing progress, even when the effort feels invisible, you're sending a message to your brain, this matters. That signal activates learning. It activates change, and over time it compounds. The reps that felt useless at first, they're laying the groundwork. They're preparing the system to make the jump later. And one day, seemingly out of nowhere, things click. But it wasn't sudden. It was built from every rep before that moment. Even the failures, the messy attempts, the awkward starts. They count. They're necessary because they give your brain data. And the brain needs data to improve. Every time you make a mistake, every time you fall short but come back again the next day, you're feeding the system exactly what it needs to get better. There is no wasted effort when you're committed to the reps, none. There's a principle in neuroscience called adaptation. The more frequently you expose your body and brain to a stimulus, the more it adapts to that demand. It gets more efficient. The neurons involved fire more smoothly. The connections get stronger. It becomes less effortful and more automatic. That's how habits form. That's how excellence is built. But it only happens when the reps are consistent. The problem is, most people quit before the adaptation happens. They stop when it gets dull, or when progress feels too slow. They assume they're not improving because they can't see the shift happening in real time. But here's the thing. Your brain doesn't change in a straight line. It changes in layers. You hit a plateau, and then you level up. But the leveling up won't happen if you don't keep pushing through the plateau. That's what the reps are for. They carry you through the flat parts so that when the breakthrough comes, you're ready for it. And showing up daily, that's what gives you the reps. That's what puts you in position to grow. You don't have to crush it every day. It's not about max effort all the time. It's about consistency. It's about being in motion, keeping the system engaged, making it impossible for progress not to happen. Because if you keep showing up, your brain can't help but adapt. It's wired to evolve under pressure. But the pressure has to be consistent. It has to be real. Even the smallest reps matter. 10 minutes of focused work. A short walk, one page written, one hard conversation started. When you stack those over days and weeks and months, you're building something. And eventually, it becomes impossible to ignore. Your skills sharpen, your resilience deepens, your identity shifts. You become someone who doesn't need to rely on hype or external validation, because the reps have already done the work inside you. This isn't about grinding endlessly. It's about being strategic, showing up on purpose, and trusting that every rep is moving you closer, even if you can't see it yet. If you do that long enough, you stop asking, will this work? And start saying, this is working. I just have to keep going. So don't chase breakthroughs. Chase repetition. Don't idolize talent. Build discipline. Trust that the work you're doing matters even when the evidence is subtle. Especially when it's subtle. Because the difference between the person who makes it and the one who doesn't is often just a few more reps, a few more days of showing up, a few more moments of refusing to quit. Force yourself to show up every day. We live in a world that constantly tells us to seek comfort. Everywhere you turn, there's an easier option, a shortcut, a way to avoid discomfort. And the brain, by default, is wired to protect you. It wants to conserve energy. It wants safety, predictability, ease. But here's the catch. Real growth lives on the other side of discomfort. That tension, that resistance, that inner friction you feel when you're pushing against your limits, that's not a signal to stop. That's a signal to lean in. When you show up every day, you're not just repeating actions, you're training your nervous system to become more resilient. You're exposing yourself over and over again to small doses of stress, challenge, and uncertainty. And by doing that, you're literally reshaping how your brain and body handle the demands of life. You're teaching yourself that discomfort isn't danger. That stress doesn't mean break. That failure isn't fatal, and that's powerful. Resilience isn't something you either have or don't have. It's built, it's earned, and it's earned by consistently exposing yourself to manageable levels of adversity. Not overwhelming, not crushing, manageable, controlled discomfort that forces you to adapt, recalibrate, and come back stronger. That's what daily effort gives you. It's like a mental gym. You don't build strength by avoiding the weight, you build it by engaging with it over and over until what once felt heavy becomes natural. But here's the thing, it doesn't happen overnight. The first time you face resistance, it feels like a wall. Your brain wants to back away, find a detour, avoid the strain, but when you face that resistance again the next day, and the next, you start to realize something. The wall isn't permanent. It can move, you can push through, and with each push, your baseline for what's tolerable increases. That's resilience, not the absence of struggle, but the ability to stay functional and focused through struggle. And the more you show up, the more you build proof. Proof that you've been here before. Proof that you've made it through worse. Proof that you can hold the line even when things get chaotic. That kind of internal evidence matters more than any motivational quote or pep talk. Because it's not theory, it's lived experience, and your nervous system remembers. It remembers the early mornings, the setbacks, the grind, the days when you showed up tired, distracted, overwhelmed, and still did the work. That memory builds confidence, not in the outcome, but in your response to challenge. That's the key. You can't control everything that happens, but you can train yourself to meet difficulty with composure. You can teach your system, through repetition, that challenge doesn't have to rattle you. That's not about ignoring stress, it's about integrating it. Learning how to regulate your state so that even when things feel unstable, you aren't. One of the most underrated parts of building resilience is emotional regulation. When you show up consistently, especially in moments when you don't want to, you're practicing control, not just over your actions, but over your state. You're learning how to breathe through discomfort, how to shift from reaction to response, how to move from chaos to clarity. That's a skill, and it's developed in the small daily battles you fight to stay on track. And let's be real, life's going to hit you hard sometimes. No routine, no system, no strategy is going to shield you from every curveball. But if you've trained consistently, if you've shown up even when it was tough, you're not caught off guard. You have the mental reps, the nervous system reps, the resilience reps. You've practiced stress, so when it arrives in full force, you're not thrown. You're ready. It's in the showing up, day after day, that you forge the kind of stability that can't be faked. The kind of strength that's not visible to the outside world but is deeply felt on the inside. The kind of resilience that doesn't flinch when pressure rises. That's not built through theory. It's built through repetition, exposure, consistency, and a willingness to lean into the very thing you used to avoid. And when you realize that, everything changes. You stop fearing the hard days. You stop negotiating with yourself every time things get uncomfortable. Because you know the discomfort is the path, the challenge is the training, and the more you engage with it, the stronger you get. So, no matter what you're facing, No matter how uncertain or overwhelming it feels, show up, breathe. Focus, move. That's how resilience is built, not in the avoidance of discomfort, but in your willingness to meet it. Force yourself to show up every day. One of the most profound things I've learned from studying the human brain and behavior is this. When you show up consistently, when you commit to doing the work day after day, you don't just change what you do, you change who you are. Identity isn't static. It's shaped by action, and more specifically, it's shaped by repeated action. Every time you follow through, every time you show up when it's hard, you're casting a vote for the type of person you are becoming. We often wait to feel different before we act different. We wait to feel motivated. We wait to feel disciplined. We wait for some internal signal to give us permission to move. But what really happens, if you watch closely, is that the change in identity comes after the repetition. You do something over and over, and the brain starts to say, okay, this is who we are now. It rewires itself around your behavior. And that new wiring creates a new self, concept, not just what you think about yourself, but what you believe about yourself at a deep neurological level. That's why showing up every day matters so much. It's not just about productivity or performance, it's about identity. If you show up as someone who trains daily, writes daily, creates daily, leads daily, helps others daily, your brain begins to mirror that. And with enough consistency, it stops being something you do. It becomes something you are. That's the moment where you're no longer forcing the behavior. You're just living it. And this isn't about faking it until you make it. This is about aligning what you do with who you want to be. The brain is plastic. It can change, adapt, evolve, but it needs input, it needs signals, it needs reps. So every time you take action that reflects your future identity, even in small ways, you're pulling that version of yourself closer. You're giving your nervous system the raw material it needs to rewire belief. What you do consistently starts to overwrite the story you've been telling yourself. Maybe for years you've seen yourself as inconsistent, lazy, undisciplined, not good enough. But if you keep showing up, if you keep proving that story wrong, day by day, choice by choice, the narrative starts to shift. You start to believe something new. Maybe I am the kind of person who follows through. Maybe I am someone who finishes. Maybe I am resilient. That shift isn't just mental. It's physiological. Neural circuits that were once dormant begin to strengthen. Patterns of avoidance get replaced with patterns of pursuit. Emotional associations change. What once felt threatening now feels exciting. What once felt impossible now feels inevitable. All because you kept showing up. And what's wild is that most people miss this. They look for breakthrough moments. They wait for some grand transformation. But identity change isn't loud. It's subtle. It creeps in while you're doing the work, especially when no one's watching. Especially when you're tired, frustrated, and questioning everything. That's when the most powerful change is happening. Because that's when the old identity is losing its grip. If you've ever felt stuck, lost, disconnected from your goals, I want to offer you this. You're not broken. You're just undertrained. You haven't yet built the neural foundation that supports the version of you that you're chasing. And that's not your fault, but it is your responsibility to change it. And the tool is simple. It's not glamorous. It's not viral. It's consistent, focused action, done daily, especially when it's hard, because the real goal isn't just to achieve something. It's to become someone. Someone who doesn't back down. Someone who doesn't need to be motivated to act. Someone whose behavior is a reflection of deep identity, not passing emotion. And that kind of person is built, not born. If you keep showing up, and I mean truly showing up not just physically, but mentally, emotionally, with intent, you'll begin to notice something. Your decisions become clearer. Your reactions become more stable. Your sense of self becomes grounded. And the things that used to derail you, the things that used to feel so overwhelming, start to lose their power. Not because life got easier, but because you got stronger, more centered, more certain, and more you. The version of yourself you're chasing isn't out there somewhere, waiting to be discovered. It's inside you, waiting to be built. One day at a time, one choice at a time, one action at a time. That's the process, that's the path. Force yourself to show up every day